been very busy monitoring intelligence activity and debating on the House floor. That would be Congressman Mike Rogers of Michigan, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mike, we welcome you to America's Forum.
Thanks, JD. It's good to hear your voice.
And we're glad to have you via Skype from the nation's capital today, Mike.
Yeah.
We want to get to yesterday's floor vote in a second, but we would be remiss if we did not concentrate first on what Darrell Issa has had to say about the Benghazi attack. You take a look at the timeline when the White House sent out an email to get a hold of YouTube. It looks like that email was sent out during the siege of the compound in Benghazi. Does it appear that way to you?
Well, I haven't seen the timestamp on the email, but that's got to be very, very critical if in fact that's true. So you line that up with the other part, that on that Saturday, the day after the attack, when they were getting together to talk about Susan Rice's Sunday appearances, they had in their hands another communication from the base chief, the CIA base chief on the ground in Benghazi, who said this was a terrorist attack. There was nothing, no protest about it. So they had in their hands, they being the White House, had that information, and that you had, if in fact that timestamp is right, the White House already working to try to find a political narrative, not trying to deal with it, not trying to send troops, not getting the president in the Situation Room. That's what should concern most Americans in that particular case.
Now, just to back up on this, Mike, here's what Darrell Issa is saying. He's saying that email was sent at 11 minutes past 9 in the evening Eastern Time, the night of the attack. It's titled Update on Response to Action Libya. The text of the email reads as follows: White House is reaching out to YouTube to advise ramification of the posting of the Pastor John video. Circumstantially, Mike, this sounds like a huge deal.
Oh, I can't underestimate the impact that that's going to have on more damage about their misleading the public. If they can show that email comes from the White House, that's incredibly damaging. And it's damaging in the sense that the other email that they didn't produce when Issa was looking for it, that said, we need to change the narrative. When Ben Rhodes, the deputy security on the National Security Council, the communications guy, was trying to change that narrative, and that email was very, very damaging. So if the evidence of the White House complicity in trying to do this, and then the subsequent cover-up, is really damning and very, very concerning. That's why this investigation needs to flush the White House portion of this out, so that we have a full and better picture. And then again, we can get to the point about justice and accountability. Neither of those things have happened. Accountability for the people at State Department that made these decisions not to support the guys on the ground with the security they asked for, and the fact that none of these folks have been brought to justice. We know where they are. CNN has interviewed them. This, you look at the whole scope of this, and it just says that they didn't care, they didn't seem too interested, they didn't seem all that concerned, and they still don't. And that's what I think is so frustrating for most Americans.
So, Mr. Rogers, if this is true, it means they sent the memo before the CIA began to put together talking points on its analysis of what happened. Is that correct?
Well, and I haven't seen the timestamp, so I don't know that. But if the date that you're telling me would be on that day, that clearly would be the case. So, I mean, I had information as chairman the very next day from the CIA, it's called an executive summary, that showed that they believed it was a terrorist attack. Then there was a more fulsome communication to the CIA from the field, from the base chief, they would call him, the head of the CIA in that particular place, Benghazi. And we know that Michael Morell, who was the deputy director of the CIA, told the White House, and which was all the people who would sit at the table to talk about this, including Ben Rhodes, they told the White House the existence of this communication where these folks said this is not, or they believe it's not about the protest. As a matter of fact, there were no protests. This was about terrorism. So all of that information coming in one way, and then this communication looking out, tells you that they had already determined, if that timestamp is right, if they'd already determined the fact that this was going to be about that video, that's really troubling.
Now, in regards to this email, we've only been released a sentence of it. Why is the rest of it being held back? Why the secrecy?
Well, and again, I'm not sure that's all. My committee is the Intelligence Committee. That came into the Government Reform Committee. So I'm not exactly sure what all is in that particular email. And hopefully we'll be having access to that in the weeks to come.
All right, Congressman, I want to talk about the bill that passed in the House yesterday, the Freedom Act. But some of the original co-sponsors, including Justin Amash, we just mentioned, voted against. I want to get your take on what went down yesterday in the current version of the Freedom Bill, which passed the House.
Well, I think it was a solid compromise. There were people, and here, let me back up. The 215 metadata program is not a domestic surveillance program. That is used by people who are trying to brand themselves as the only constitutionalists who walk the halls of Congress, and that is just completely inaccurate. And it's wrong, and it's misleading. And so you had people like Jerry Nadler from New York. JD, you know, and can weigh in on Jerry Nadler, and my position on most things is probably as far apart as you can get. But we forged a bill that said, listen, there's all of the reviews, all of the investigations, no one found any illegality. They didn't find it was unconstitutional. People did have a discomfort with the fact that the NSA was holding metadata with no names and no addresses and searched it about 300 times a year. They just said, we don't like that. There could be a potential for damage or for harm or for abuse. Okay, so what we did is went back and said, let's try to find a way where we can still make sure that we can catch a terrorist who picks up the phone in Pakistan or Afghanistan or Yemen and calls into the United States to engage sleeper cells that they have here. We better have a way to be able to do that. I think this was a great compromise and that we were able to do that. It protects civil liberties. It also, at the same time, allows us to have the operational ability to catch that terrorist who calls into the United States to say, get on the airplane and start your operation, or go blow up the mall, or go blow up the bakery. This is really critical. And all of this other talk, why I think is unfortunate. It's more about the branding of a politician and a celebrity style than it is about the substance of the issue that will mean saving the lives of real Americans right here at home.
And just to clarify, sorry, JD, you're saying that Justin Amash and some others are more concerned about their celebrity status as politicians?
I'm saying that those who are misstating the facts on this and calling it domestic surveillance, it is not that at all. Matter of fact, you know, they also try to lead people to believe that the NSA is listening to your phone calls. They're not. Reading your emails. They're not. If they're doing it, and it's not through appropriate court-ordered system, they're going to go to jail. And so that's not happening. So this inflammatory language is only serving, and for what purpose? They certainly have access to classified information to know how this works. What purpose would you do that other than trying to make sure that your brand as the only person or persons who care about the Constitution, which I argue is offensive to those of us who have taken the oath and, by the way, worn the uniform of the United States to protect the Constitution of the United States. I just think it's candidly, I think it's shameful.
Well, Mike, let's drill down a little bit on this, because we have this perennial debate about freedom and liberty versus security. Striking the balance. We've got about a minute and a half left. Give us the view as the current chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. You say a lot of this is misperceived by the American people, that our civil liberties are not being jeopardized?
Listen, if I thought our civil liberties were being justified or abused, I'd be the first one to try to fix it. And that's my job, my responsibility. Again, I took an oath to the Constitution. I understand the Constitution. I wore the uniform of the United States military to protect the Constitution. I feel I have that same duty as a member of Congress. So, no, I don't. And so that's why you have this overwhelming bipartisan, extremely liberal, extremely conservative, and everybody in between came to the agreement that this was the right way to protect privacy and make sure that we had operational ability to catch a terrorist overseas calling in the United States.
Just one last question.
You can have both. You can have both, JD. I think you know that. And I think this bill represents that.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Mike Rogers, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Skyping in from Washington, D.C. We appreciate your take on these emerging issues, and we look forward to having you again here on America's Forum.
Look forward to it. Thanks, JD.
So the question we ask you, Mike Rogers said if it was jeopardizing your civil liberties, he would move to stop it. Is this the right kind of compromise? Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, # America's Forum.
Imagine if you had a secret code for making money. a code buried deep within